Making a video. An Inmendum video. A regular Inmendum video where I shall crank and complain about things and such. Yeah, people. So, two videos that were sort of curious. Piro did a couple of videos where he's talking about relativity, both physically and psychologically or something. Like truth is relative. And I don't think it can be counter-argued that that's only true if your statements about the truth are vague, are incomplete, or mushy. If you make your statements explicit and technical, they are either accurate or inaccurate. There's no relative truth value. There's accurate or inaccurate. Especially when we get to descriptions of reality. And they use this word skeptic all the time, which is just such a... It's like calling yourself a fartist because now and then you fart, or a belchist because now and then you belch. You know, yes, now and then it's appropriate to be skeptical because you're given cause to be skeptical. Most of the things that you see in the world, there's no reason to be skeptical about them. You can know every bit of their history. You can witness their creation and death. You can, there's no reason to doubt authenticity. Now and then, though, when somebody's telling you a story about how they were talking to God or something, or saw some orb flying through their living room, taking random photographs, yeah, that's time to be skeptical. After a big night of drinking and drugs, especially. But anyway, yeah, time to be skeptical. When some idiot says something like, rockets don't work in space, jet engines, whatever, rocket engines. It's like, what are you, retarded? Yeah, time to be skeptical, because that sounds really dumb. And the facts, volumes and volumes of them, indicate that that's inaccurate and stupid. So, yeah, good reason to be skeptical. Now, if that's somebody's history, like if somebody's a truther and believes in some kind of bizarre Illuminati theory, well, and then they're telling you how to make cookies, there's reason to be skeptical that they can make a good cookie if they can't figure out their Illuminati truther theory is idiotic, reptilians, whatever. Alright, so then the other video was Snake Plisskenus, who made a quite profoundly disappointing video where he was making excuses for religion, and certainly threw in there the little gratuitous, there's not, don't get me wrong, there's not some things wrong with Christianity. Yeah, like everything's wrong with it. Do the wrong thing for the wrong reason. I mean, the whole thing is shit. In terms of it's neither, he made the excuse that somehow it's practical. There's nothing practical about it. Do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. Well, it doesn't work unless you got a contract that says you're going to get the same in return. Because if you're not, maybe it is better to fuck them first. So, you have to, religion just doesn't have, and especially the whole God thing, and it's just such a lie. And, to make these arguments is somehow, well, for the sake of some pragmatic practicality, and a practicality that doesn't make any sense, in the sense the imbeciles are over-reproducing and under-educating their kids, and we're just increasing the percentage of people who are stupid imbeciles, so it's obviously not having a good impact. So where's the practicality of it? It's not really practical. I mean, versus car thieves, yes. Better Christian than car thief, maybe. Or hacker, or crank caller, but not much. You don't have to be much of a good person to to be better as a honest person than a dishonest religious kook. Well, I won't say dishonest religious kook. What I'll say is either a kook. If you really believe it, you're a kook. You're crazy. You're irrational and insane if you really believe. If you think it makes sense to say, that faith is a good reason to believe something. I mean, it's oxymoronic on its face. And so, so you're either insane or a liar. There's nothing in between. There's no reasonable belief in God. And we know that most of the people who believe in God don't really believe in God. They're just doing this stupid snake plisskenous weaselly crap. They think it's good for other people to be scared of God. It'll make them better people if they're scared, because they think they actually believe it, when they know they don't, because none of them will sacrifice the tiniest piece of skin for their religion. They'll sin all over the place. They'll violate the rules anytime they have the opportunity. They're the easiest people in the universe to seduce, because the principle of their faith doesn't mean shit, because all they're doing is saying, I believe in it because other people need it. Other people are sinful. They need something to stop them from being sinful. Even though they watch themselves, they watch the religion not work on themselves. So anyway, it's just repulsive. So anyway, it all gets to this one argument, which is the truth is not elusive or confusing or complex. It's none of those things. There's no excuse for this relativity excuses, or I can't be sure excuses, or let's lie for pragmatic sake because we can't figure out where we are and what universe we're in, or we can. Evolution. We can know exactly what we are. We can see the patterns built into our function. You can know certain things that, yes, if I had the life that guy grew up with, I'd be an asshole too. Or if I did that, yeah, you could figure all that shit out. You could figure out that we're just reactionary organisms. That, I thought about turtles. I do this often. I have a thing for turtles since childhood. For whatever reason, I don't exactly understand it. They just seem like an underdog thing, turtles. So you kind of root for them. That's how I looked at it, I guess. They have a huge advantage, but it's such a liability at the same time. I guess they seemed very introspective, turtles. They seem to take a lot of time to pause and think about it. And I guess that's what I liked about turtles. They kind of look like they're thinking. Now maybe they're not thinking very good or complicated, but they always look like they're thinking. Pretty eyes. They always have kind of pretty eyes. Anyway, not really the point of the video is figuring out psychologically why I have an affection for turtles, but I just happen to. So yes, they come to mind when I'm searching for something, a metaphor. Use a turtle, because But anyway, so it's just a reaction. It's a mechanical thing. Happened when I was a kid. Got a prejudice, a bias towards turtles, and the bias just keeps revealing itself. Not complicated. Don't need to be skeptical. Don't need to be relativistic. Don't need to be pragmatic or practical in any other sense than to say that's the simple truth. It's a psychological reaction to a circumstance in my life where at the right time a turtle showed up. And it was my friend or whatever, and ever since then I've always had a prejudice towards turtles because one helped me cross the street one day or something. But whatever. Okay, I don't want to get into psychology, but this is all about psychology in a way. Philosophy ends up being psychology because people keep using these silly, these Sasquatch, boogeyman behind the tree kind of excuses for all this uncertainty and confusion. And no, none of that exists. They keep seeing all these moving shadows that just aren't there. And it's all psychology that's throwing those things into reality. It's not anything about the facts that is at all confusing. The reality isn't confusing. They're fucked up eyes are what's fucking the game. If you call psychology like a film on your eyes, it just gets in your way. But anyway, that's really not the subject of the video. But like I said, it's always the subject, because it's the real problem why you can't have a rational conversation about reality, is because people can't see. Their eyes are full of psychological goo. To grotesque extents. So anyway, back to the metaphor. So using a turtle. So I thought of a turtle today. So I thought about the fact that they're kind of they don't have a whole lot of range in terms of function, right? Something tells them they gotta go lay some eggs, right? So they have some, I got some gas, I got some problems I gotta get rid of. So they crawl up on the shore, dig a hole, and fart out some eggs. And they do that by instinct, okay? Nobody taught them how to do it. They just have a mechanical process that triggers. This is the movement. I do this thing with my arms backwards where I flip the dirt out of the hole, and I have to do these certain... And all of that stuff mechanically takes place. So you could take, turtle A, B, C, D, E, F. Say I had whatever number of turtles labeled, and I could put them in the same place at the same time of year, if they were the same sex or whatever, and put them in the same condition, similar condition, and they'll pretty much do the same thing. Within a 3-day period, they'll all do this, crawl on shore, fart out the eggs, blah, blah, blah. Mechanical thing. Now, we're doing the same thing. We're not doing anything different than those turtles are doing. We're just as mechanical in the basic function of being a human. It's just that we have this much more complex, the dominoes are closer to each other, and it's hitting lots more, and they can go in all kinds of patterns based on these interactions. So there's more variance in the variables going in, and so the output has that magnitude of larger probabilities. So it's like having dice with 5 sides and 6 sides and 6 numbers, and having dice that have 100 sides and 100 numbers. The combinations is exponentially kind of curve. I mean, it's a big curve in terms of the increase of potential reactions or differences. And some of those differences can be more than subtle differences. The difference between 100 and 1. Well, you can't roll a 1, but theoretically. Well, I guess you could with 1 dice. Oh, moth. Oh, moths around. Anyway, but we're doing the same thing. We're just rolling dice. We just have dice that have a little more complexity to them. But the basic function is the same. The world we exist in is the same. We can describe the world if we have these ideas and principles about the truth meaning something and evidence meaning something. We have a ton of evidence that yes, this thing that we're doing just started in a mushy sea of putrid chemicals we couldn't even survive smelling now, and that's where it started, and it evolved to eat its own shit. Essentially, the shit eaters won, and and then there's the whole, like I said, the whole evolutionary process of this DNA molecule. There's no God here. There's no let's make it conscious, let's make it feel. It inevitably will be a feeling thing. As soon as you start evolution, it automatically creates neurons and feeling things. None of that is written into this process. It's just part of what makes something successful through the course of the evolution that took place on Earth. But the evolution, if I could go back to that first cell, the first DNA molecule, and I could rerun evolution without having exactly the same circumstances, just some kind of subtle change, the outcomes where there wasn't any consciousness would far outnumber, in my opinion. I think logically we can understand that would be the truth, would far outnumber the universes where they did go conscious. They did do the neuron thing. And then the more complex thing of actually creating sensations that are coherent as motivations in the context of a symbolic representation model of reality. So our brain models reality. It had to do that first. First it had to create a model of reality, and then it found a way to shove value into it by giving us sensations related to the running of the model, and to associate the things we see with sensations. And that's all we're doing. It's just association. So we're just functioning as a mechanical device, just as mechanical as the turtle that lays the eggs, just as mechanical as the bird that feeds its young, all the things that these animals do without ever being taught how to do it. It's just a mechanical process. And it's just as mechanical for us, except we're taught. The environment teaches us. It plugs in influences and biases, like turtle. And that's it. So the differences are these subtle, almost, they're certainly relevant in terms of the outcome of whether you're a good guy or a bad guy might be decided by some of these subtle changes. But they're just subtle changes. They're not dramatic changes. They're just little things that change in somebody's life that makes a big change in the outcome. Little event happens and it makes a huge impact, like being paralyzed or something. A little event can be paralyzing, to your function as a human, because you'll have a thought pattern that's just completely malicious and destructive, petty and resentful, negative, bad. So anyway, there's no reason to play this game like we should be talking about truth being relative. It's all just about making statements that are clear. You don't say something silly like, I love you, because, the word love doesn't have any reasonable definition. You don't talk about free speech. You don't talk about free anything, really, except freedom from jail, or freedom from disease, or freedom from something. But outside of that context, the word free is kind of a stupid, ignorant person's word. But if you use real language, you use some effort to be clear in what you're saying, you can make declarative statements, and they're either right, correct, accurate, or they're incorrect and inaccurate. That's it. There's no relativity. Skepticism is bullshit. A well-formed argument at trial, no reason to be skeptical when the evidence shows up and it's voluminous. No reason to say, no, I can't deal with this idea of everything pointing to a truth. As I have to play skepticism, for the sake of it. No, there's no philosophy of being a skeptic. It's just silly, stupid, ignorant, dumb. You have to have cause to be skeptical. And we don't have cause to be skeptical about our origins in terms of the last 4 billion years of it anyway. And no reason to speculate on magic purposes for the universe. It's a mechanical thing, and nothing in the intrinsic mechanism indicates any capacity to understand what torture is, or unnecessary harm is, or any of that shit. That's why it makes 20,000 sea turtles per mature sea turtle. That's why it makes 10,000 baby octopuses that get killed to make one octopus that reproduces. That's why there's gratuitous waste all over the place. That's why people die badly, unnecessarily sloppy. That's why unnecessarily sloppy as a concept is because this isn't made by anything intelligent. There's no intelligence to this design. It's just a mechanical process that has a few tiny rules. And the rules of the genetic replication is this selfish gene style rules. They're just little hunks of code, and the code won't exist if it doesn't, by accident of its function, do something that makes it exist, that makes it win. It doesn't know it's throwing the javelin the farthest, or it's running the fastest, or it's doing any of that shit. It just happens to do it. It bites something's head off, and it's happened to be the right thing to do because it was going to get its head bitten off. So it bites heads off, and biting heads off worked. And the fact that it worked means it can now guarantee its survival, for a while anyway. And as the game is played out, it's sort of demonstrated that every year, in this gladiator war, I've made this metaphor before, but it's like the gladiators can get taller, and then they get too tall, and now somebody shorter can play a better game because they're quicker and more agile. And so then the game twists, and now the gladiators who win are midgets. And then the next year they're going to be fat, and then the next year they're going to be this. And it'll constantly change the prescription of what's required to win. And it doesn't have anything to do with some kind of rational definition of the best or the fittest. It just means fittest based on a set of circumstance that exists. You're fittest if, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, is the principle. You're fittest if your adversary has become muscle bound. Bigger and stronger to a point where now he can't eat his dinner because he can't bend his arm enough to get the food in his mouth, kind of an argument. That's all that's at play here. That's our circumstance. And there's nothing to goo about or pretend that it's some sort of, chitty bang bang adventure. They're all going to go on some magical fairyland adventure, and then the good witch Glenda or whoever is going to show up, and there'll be no place like home, and we'll go back to our little gray farm and plant potatoes and slob the pigs, or whatever you do with the pigs. Slop them or something. What do you do to pigs? I know you do something horrible. But yes, just how charming that must be. Right outside the living room window is the little pile of pigs. Oh yes, there's no place like home. Huh? What? Yeah, no place like that. There's a place like that. It's called an outhouse. Why would I go live in an outhouse? Anyway, no, I'll stay in Oz. Thank you very much. Looks a lot nicer. Especially without that bitchy witch flying around anymore. I mean, it's every reason to stay. Fucking it's boring anyway. Boring. Yes, you can make a good cookie, but just, I'm going to leave Oz for a cookie? Come on. I'm sure those Munchkin people can make cookies. They make lollipops and shit. Anyway, so there's no adventure here. There's no grand story. There's no reason to keep placating people with these delusions that this is all some kind of grand game. You're just a bunch of snapping turtles. You're just a bunch of stupid organisms. And you'll end up surviving as a species because you're all little selfish cunts trying to survive as individuals. and you'll play this stupid genetics game and this little stupid, I don't know what to call it, this delusion that there's something grand going on here besides just a lot of pointless chasing, a bunch of need, a bunch of desperation, a bunch of worry, a bunch of angst, a bunch of absolute horror. I mean, watching the stuff you love die and suffer. I mean, all of this pain and all of this crap, and these glib fuckers just keep stepping over it. I mean, you watch them, you watch it happen to their, right in their own life. You watch it, and you watch them step right over it, like it didn't happen. No. So, fuck this placate the religious delusion that this all makes sense somehow, that God has some mystery purpose, and that we're all going to go to some frickin' heaven orgy, except the only problem is we're not going to know who the hell we are when we get there. We have absolutely no identity relevant to who we are. I just can't. I'm just not a voyeur enough for that, to find great value in imagining the non-me having a good time. No. But even if it were true, it's empty and superficial and silly. These are just fables, and this is just lies to aggrandize biological function, to aggrandize and embiggen the story of another creepy organism scurrying across the surface of the earth. And that's all they all are. And yes, some are aesthetically pleasing to us, and what does that mean? Absolutely nothing. It means nothing. Nothing. It's like saying, I'm a tit man. What is that? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a conditioned response. It's just a mechanical function. Nothing to, no truth value. What you value, what you need, has no integrity in its creation. It's created out of the shit of just this stupid, competitive, ego functions, feeling important or useful or necessary, all of this dependency, just parasites molesting parasites. It's, and to say that some dopey theology that makes people not think about it and just keep behaving like fucking dumb animals is a good thing. That's what St. Pliskus was basically saying. These stupid idiots that keep having kids they don't have any clue how to raise, and they should just keep doing it. That's harmless. It ain't harmless, asshole. You can't get more harmful than being a creator. So anyway. So there's no confusion. The truth of our existence is right there. To be all kinds of statements can be made about the truth of our origin, the truth of the mechanics of evolution, the truth that we are a bizarre event, but bizarre isn't necessarily good. But that's it. Alright, it's probably enough for this video. Probably. Okay, sorry if there was fan noise, but it's really hot. It's still 87 in here. Anyway, and it's late. It's 87 at 12:30 at night. That's 30. It was 87 is 37 Celsius. Yeah, I think so. 36. So anyway, but yeah, it hit 92 in here today inside the house. That's a crazy number. Anyway, until next time. Such.